Hello, welcome back to our weekly updates and questions and answers. Feel free to like, share, all the usual stuff to get people to come and join, and feel free to put questions in the comments, and I will do my very best to answer the questions as they come in. Obviously a lot happening, as there is a lot happening every week. The main thing I want to focus on today, but maybe I'll do the smaller things first, but is the whole question of the neutrality forums and the continuation of the government's war on neutrality. The other things that I do want to, before I talk about neutrality, is to give a shout out for the protesters from the Not Our Fault 100% Redress campaign. They're staging a 24-hour protest today. It's the longest day of the year, and they're outside the Dáil, have been for whatever amount of hours it is so far, and still have many more hours to go to get to early morning tomorrow. And they're doing so because they're people who are victims of shoddy building work that was facilitated by the system of self-certification set up by both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in government, as a result of which they are some of the 100,000 people who live in apartments and duplexes built between 1991 and 2013, affected by defects, mostly fire defects, facing an average bill of €20,000. In reality, that's going to go up. Some of them facing bills of €70,000. We have had a commitment by the government to say that they'll have a 100% redress scheme. That's welcome. That came after pressure from the campaign, which we helped to initiate with residents. But when they said that, they'd said that there was a scheme, they'd bring in emergency funding. We still don't have any details of anything like that, and the latest we have is a suggestion that the scheme will be up and running by autumn of next year, which is likely when we will have an election. So that's not good enough to kick it off into the next government. We need emergency funding now. We can't wait until the end of the year. This is a question of health and safety, of life and death for people potentially, and it just is utterly negligent by the government not to move much more quickly on that. Second issue, before I get to neutrality, I just want to mention is to say full support to the Iceland workers. People might know it's something we've been raising in the Dáil over the past number of months. Iceland workers who were organised in the Independent Workers Union, they've been treated appallingly since basically Iceland, like the overall Iceland brand in Britain, got rid of the stores in Ireland. They transferred to a different owner, and since then the workers have been treated absolutely awfully. They have been left without wages in many cases. They've been left in terrible working conditions in work, and then they arrived to work this morning in many different places to find the shutters down and seemingly their jobs gone. Very courageously, the workers in Coolock have occupied their store. I think that's a great example to set to workers, to say that it's Iceland workers, as in Iceland the shop in Ireland. They're workers in Ireland for Iceland. I see someone giving out for supporting Iceland workers. Iceland, the frozen food store. Encourage people to go down. You don't have to go to Reykjavik to support them. You go to Coolock and show your support to those workers. But it's a very good example to workers, Iceland workers across this country, and probably in Iceland as well, to say how you can take action, try and defend your jobs. A striking thing, I saw that the company was in the High Court yesterday, and they are gone into examinership. And part of the reason why is they've got €38 million worth of debts. But 36 million worth of those debts, and a vast majority of those debts, are to the parent company. So they're debts to themselves. They're not debts to anybody else, and obviously can be manufactured. Then what I wanted to focus on there is mostly is on the question of these neutrality forums and the war on neutrality. People may have seen, last week we called it out in the Dáil. So there's 4 days of what's called it's called the Consultative Forum on International Security Policy. It's in Cork tomorrow, then it's in Galway on Friday, and then in Dublin for 2 days next week. And this is completely like a sham. It's a ready up. It's not a real balanced debate. We called it out last week in the Dáil. We pointed out the fact that the chairperson, who's handpicked by the government, a woman called Louise Richardson. She is she's a DBE, a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire, to give her full title. But more importantly, she is on record as supporting the US invasion of Afghanistan, supporting US coups and attempted coups in Latin America, and completely opposing the struggle of the hunger strikers for political status. So she's completely biased. She has her mind made up, and she's going to be the one who writes a report at the end of it. But not only that, not only is the chairperson entirely biased, the speakers are completely biased. You have, out of about 72 speakers, close to 50 are on record as being pro-militarization, anti-neutrality, pro-NATO, so they're on one side of the argument, and to be generous, about 10 people are on the other pro-neutrality side of the argument. So the speakers are stacked 5-1 against neutrality. It's completely blatant. I think it's even too blatant for some in the government. It's given the game away. No, I'm anti-NATO. So that's what, like, this thing is set up. Not that at the end of it we just join NATO just like that. This is a process, bit by bit. They're kind of trying to basically boil the frog alive, so you get to a point where you're almost as good as in NATO a few years down the line, and they say, well, at this stage we really should go and join NATO. That's what they are trying to do. It's just a forum, Paul, not even a Dáil debate. What's the problem? You have many public forums. Well, the problem is that we were originally promised a citizens' assembly about this. So citizens' assembly is made up of a random selection of 100 citizens to come up with a proposal. And we would have welcomed that. That would then come up, bring it to the Dáil, and ultimately let's have a referendum so that people can decide. The reason we have a problem with this is because it's a sham. It's not a real process. It's not a real public forum. It's not really open to the public to participate. The speakers are all selected by the government and are selected in a massively biased way. And what will happen at the end is that a report will be written, and the report will say, we need to get rid of the triple lock, we need to massively increase military expenditure, and we need to be involved in more processes of European militarization. I could write the report myself. And then that report, the government will say, well, we had these forums, and they came up with this recommendation, and sure, we're going to go ahead with this now. That's what this agenda is. So we think, like, it's a sham. We're not going to participate in this sham. All the opposition parties are now criticising this sham after Michael D. Higgins came out at the weekend in a very, very useful intervention. So we think, and we think the other parties should also refuse to participate in this, to expose it for what it is, and join the protests that are going to be happening every morning outside these forums, where the peace movement, where the pro-neutrality movement, where the anti-war movement is going to be protesting and giving their position on these things. How would NATO membership affect the civilians? I mean, ultimately NATO membership would affect ordinary people in this country, not like mostly the children of the academics or the business people or the politicians, but the children of ordinary people, in the sense of people who are compelled for economic reasons to join the army. They could be sent abroad to fight for wars, the kind of wars we saw in Iraq, in Afghanistan, led by US and other NATO countries for oil and profit. Like you saw that the Irish government allowed Shannon Airport to be used by the US military, continues to be used, but over 3 million US soldiers have now gone through. If it wasn't for the triple lock, which meant that the Irish government couldn't participate in that because there wasn't a UN Security Council agreement to it, or a UN General Assembly resolution, then the Irish government could have participated. If you're in NATO, then there's an obligation to participate if any NATO state is attacked. So just as the Russians are not the good guys in the world, nor are the NATO and US imperialism. And in a world which is being divided between these two major power blocks, Russia and China and others on the one side, US and their allies, including European powers on the other, we think Ireland should not be part of either of those blocs and should be a consistent voice in favour of human rights, against oppression, against imperialism, against invasions, and be consistent in opposing those. And so opposing this agenda of the Irish government to drag us into, over time, the NATO bloc. Just looking through the questions now. Someone said, I saw you in the Dáil last Wednesday. Yeah, I'm sure I was definitely in the Dáil last Wednesday. What do you think of the censorship bill? I'd say that's probably a reference to the hate speech legislation. So go back and check. If you go and check my Facebook page or Instagram or whatever, like I was basically the only TD in the Dáil speaking on behalf of people before profit, opposing what was being done there and putting forward amendments to try to ensure protection of freedom of speech, to change this particular part whereby effectively you could be criminalised for having material that you don't publish. So go and check that out. Let me have a look. Looking for any other questions on pro-imperialism. Well, good luck with that. I think, thankfully, most people are not. You're already filling our country with NATO soldiers. What do you mean by that, MJ? So we hand out decision-making to UN instead of making our own decisions. So I think that's a reference to the triple lock. So at the moment, for the Irish government to send troops abroad, there needs to be three things, triple lock. 1, government decision. 2, Dáil vote. And 3, a decision of the UN. In reality, government decision and Dáil decision is basically the same thing, because the government has a majority in the Dáil. So if you got rid of the requirement for the UN, then Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil would be free to send troops to Iraq, to Afghanistan, wherever. That was the only thing that prevented them. You go and find a document from Fine Gael 20 years ago called Beyond Neutrality, which describes the triple lock as a political straitjacket. So if they were saying, okay, we want to replace the requirement for UN agreement with instead a referendum of the people to send troops abroad, fine. With that'll be even better. That would be great. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying get rid of this, and then just basically hand all the power to the government. And like, we don't trust this government in terms of the decisions they make on foreign policy or anything else, and their ability to send people away. You can't keep bringing in references. Scaremongering. We want NATO and Shannon, not Putin. No, we don't want Putin and Shannon either. We don't want any of them in Shannon. I have no idea what these questions about Killian Keane getting caught taking pictures of children on Lewis are about. There's no one called Killian Keane as a TD, by the way. So I don't know. I'll go and have a look up about what that is. How will PVP tackle such high college accommodation costs? That's a very good question. The main thing is to build student accommodation, publicly build student accommodation, not this privatised student accommodation, which is super expensive. So you need to have, as part of a plan, a state construction company, building public housing. A certain portion of that needs to be purpose-built student accommodation, and then we need rent controls to bring rents down generally, which would also benefit students who are in the private rented sector. Yeah, what's your thoughts on African asylum seekers being treated differently from Ukrainian refugees? Yeah, I'm against the discrimination against non-Ukrainians. I think it's correct that we should treat people. Ireland is one of the richest countries in the world. That wealth is all hoarded by those at the top, with a huge number of vacant houses, 50,000 vacant for 6 years or more. We can and should treat people with decency when they arrive here, arriving from horrific situations. People may have seen the story now a week ago in Greece where hundreds of people, possibly to 500 people, drowned in the Mediterranean because of the actions of the Greek Coast Guard, it looks like. Absolutely horrendous. So people are fleeing awful situations, coming here, and then if they're not Ukrainian and they're single men, but even some children and women, being put on the streets by the government. I think that is absolutely scandalous. I think it's horrendous. This double standards. Thanks a lot for your support. Thoughts on fairness of Citizens Assembly on drugs? Well, I welcome that it's a Citizens Assembly. That's a good thing, you know. Next steps. Let's see what they report. And then see. I mean, we're very clear in terms of our attitude on drugs. White cheddar or yellow cheddar and a grilled cheese. It doesn't matter. Like, they taste the same. So, put them where you live. I think that's a reference to refugees. There's a asylum seeker centre just around the corner from where I live. There's no problems in the world as a consequence of it. What about our own homeless? This is why Irish are so angry. Well, that's what we've been protesting and continue to protest all the time, fighting to build a movement about the housing crisis. Hopefully there's going to be a big protest, either in the run-up to or immediately after the budget. But we need to unite people. The landlords, the developers, those who are benefiting from the housing crisis, they are laughing. They love it. The idea that people are blaming now asylum seekers. Sure, we had a housing crisis, a homeless crisis before the war in Ukraine. It's not why we have a housing crisis, really not. It is distracting people and dividing people to say that these people coming in are the problem. They're not the problem. The problem are the people who are living in very, very big houses and are getting rich off the housing crisis. The big corporate landlords, the developers, speculators, all of those whose profits are going through the roof and who the government represents and the government are a part of in terms of being landlords themselves. You protest to welcome undocumented to come live in tents beside our own people. But my point is, nobody needs to be living in tents. So any homeless person is entitled to emergency accommodation. Some emergency accommodation is pretty crap. It's pretty horrendous. So that's why people end up living in tents. So we need to have better emergency accommodation that people aren't like homeless people don't feel that they need to live in tents. And we should not be putting people out on the streets. We have 50,000 vacant homes for 6 years or more. Is a choice to put people on the streets. So no, I don't agree that we shouldn't be taking in any more refugees. I think you'll find you don't take any more refugees, you're still going to have a housing crisis, you're still going to have a health crisis. None of those things are going to get even better in reality. There's plenty of place for people to go. We have plenty of room in this country. Like I said, I'll say it over and over again, there's 50,000 vacant homes for 6 years or more. In total, there's about 140,000 vacant homes. And we think we need use it or lose it legislation. We think we need to be building public housing. We need to use a state construction company. Exactly, we have loads of money. Exactly, so we should refuse to be for ordinary people to be divided. Exactly, the big vulture fund managers, etc. Exactly, the number of vacant homes is embarrassing. And the other point I'd make, just because people are asking about refugees, like, don't just see that people coming here fleeing from horrible situations are just like a burden. You know, it's all at the cost of the Irish taxpayer. People want to work. We should allow people to work, just as the Ukrainians are allowed to work. You know probably that we have a massive crisis in terms of getting teachers, getting nurses, getting construction workers. So let's have people in, adding to our economy, and actually creating more resources. We need more people. Paul, you're bold. That's very true and very observant. So that's the point. Is that, like, people bring resources with them, you know, by the skills and so on that they bring to this economy, as opposed to seeing that people are just bringing a negative or whatever. Get a wig. Exactly. People's apathy towards refugees and madness could easily be in their situation someday. I think that's a very good point. Tony Benn, who was this like figure, kind of like Jeremy Corbyn, back in the day, he was a decent on the left wing of the Labour Party in Britain. He famously said that if you see how governments treat refugees, that's how they'd treat the rest of us if they could get away with it. You know, if they get away with putting refugees on the streets, actually it emboldens them to put more homeless people on the streets. They feel that they get away with it. It's why we should unite as ordinary people against the super rich and those who the government actually represent. Exactly, people making the point about fleeing to America. Sorry, just trying to. What can I do to join your party? Go pvp.ie/join. That would be great. Alright, I'm going to leave it there for now. Barry's rather than Lions. It's a good discussion in the chat. Plenty of people, I think, making important points. Yeah, so leave it there. Final thoughts, just support the Kulak with the Iceland workers occupying in Kulak. Again, they're not in Iceland, the country, they're in Iceland, the shops. So go down to your local Iceland, show your support to the workers. And if you can, 22nd, so tomorrow in Cork, 23rd in Galway, and then the 26th and 27th in Dublin at Dublin Castle. Come down to the protests at these consultative forums and show people, show the media, show the political establishment, you don't accept this sham consultation. You want a referendum about neutrality, and you want our neutrality to be defended. Someone's asking any update. I think on the occupation, I think it's still going on. So if you can go down to show your support, definitely do that. All right. Take care. Bye bye.